This is the pre-lab for physical chemical changes, and when you're doing this, there are pre-lab questions on the paper, so make sure you also do those. On the second page, there is a tip here, and this is going to help you save time when we're doing the lab. It says to use water, get 2 milliliters of water and put it into a test tube, because a lot of our measurements in this lab are going to be 2 milliliters, and if you have a test tube filled up with 2 milliliters of water, you can just approximate the volume by now holding them up and pouring the liquid so it's at about the same height there. So it's a nice quick way to get 2 milliliters so you don't have to use the graduated cylinder every time, because most of the time approximate 2 milliliters is good enough. We're going to use a lot of test tubes, so you want your marking pencil too, right, to keep all these things marked and labeled so you're not accidentally using the wrong thing. For the first experiment, it says to grind 1 crystal of copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate. So if you put 1 crystal in here, you only need 1 crystal like that, it's not real big. When you want to grind something in the mortar and pestle, once you put it in there, you don't like hammer on it. What you want to do is push down on it to get it to break into smaller pieces. And now once it's like that, you just push down and move it around in a circle, and it grinds up pretty quickly. You want the pieces pretty small, so a little more than that is usually good enough, and that's what you want. Now when you do that, it says to pour it into a test tube, and you're going to need a test tube clamp, all right, not a test tube holder, one that will clamp to a ring stand, and you want to heat that over a Bunsen burner. When you heat it, make sure the test tube is not pointed towards you or anybody else, point it towards the back wall, and that'll be a nice safe way of doing it. All right, for the second experiment, you're going to need magnesium ribbon. It says to obtain a 5 centimeter piece and then cut it in 2. I am going to have it cut in 2 already for you, so you need to grab 2 pieces. One of them you are going to hold in tongs, and you're going to hold over the Bunsen burner. When you do that, don't hold it real low. You want to hold it up a little bit. The Bunsen burner flame is a little hotter up there and it will ignite. So for this one, when it ignites, do not look directly at it. It could hurt your eyes. What you want to do is just look out of the corner of your eyes, and once it ignites, you know, hold it over an evaporating dish is what it says to do to collect the ashes. And you can compare the ashes to the other piece of magnesium that you haven't used yet. When you're done that, the other piece of magnesium you're going to put into a test tube, and it says to add 2 milliliters of hydrochloric acid, 3 molar hydrochloric acid. So this is where you can just approximate that 2 milliliters with the water we filled up already. The lab says 3 capital M HCl. The M is molar. It's basically telling you the concentration of it. So 3 molar HCl, that's what that means. For lab 3, or I'm sorry, procedure 3, you want to use 1 molar sodium hydroxide. That is going to be a colorless liquid. And you're going to have 1 molar ammonium chloride. That's also a colorless liquid. It says to use wafting techniques to smell those. When you waft, you direct those fumes towards your nose. Don't just put it right under your nose and take a big whiff. Safety hazard doing that. So waft it towards yourself, and then you're going to combine both liquids into a test tube and smell again using the wafting technique, and you should notice a difference there. For procedure 4, you're going to have 1 gram of a solid, sodium sulfate. That is a white solid. You're going to put it in a beaker. I think a 100 ml beaker will work well for this. Remember, you go by this number over here. And it says to add deionized water up to 50 milliliters in the beaker. So this doesn't have to be an extremely accurate number. Just about 50 will be good enough. Stir it up using a stirring rod, and that solid should dissolve. Now you have to pay attention to the directions. It says add 2 milliliters to a test tube. So again, use that 2 milliliters of water we initially did as an approximation to get to 2 milliliters in there. And then you want to add 5 milliliters into an evaporating dish. The evaporating dish you want to cover with a watch glass, and you want to heat over the Bunsen burner. Basically, you're going to cause that water to evaporate. Make sure the watch glass is on there, because sometimes when you're heating this, as it's boiling, as it's cool, or as it's heating up, it will pop a little bit, and you don't want that hot material to pop out of the evaporating dish. So put a watch glass on it to protect that from happening. Now there's an opening here and that's where the steam will come out. So don't have that pointed directly at you. Point that towards the back so you don't have to worry about the steam getting anybody. The 2 milliliters that you put in the test tube, what you want to do is add another liquid to it, barium nitrate, that's another colorless liquid, and you're going to combine those in a beaker and observe. Write down the observations. All right, lab station or procedure number 5. You're going to use hydrochloric acid, 0.1 molar. Make sure you grab the right HCl because there's 3 molar and there's 0.1 molar. For this one we're using 0.1 molar and you're going to use 0.1 molar NaOH, sodium hydroxide. There's also another bottle of sodium hydroxide that's 1 molar. So make sure you grab the right stuff and you want to test them both with pH paper. The pH paper has a scale here. It's going to turn a certain color whether it's an acid or a base. And they're also hanging up around the room in these sections. So you can take your paper and hold it up and compare where you are and write down the number that goes with that. And then you're going to combine those and test it on another piece of pH paper. What works well is to take the stirring rod, dip it in the solution and touch it to the paper. And then you get a little bit on there without it being a mess and you can compare it that way and make your observations. For step 6, you're going to use sulfur and iron. It says to combine them in a small beaker. Again, the 100 ml beaker will work fine. And stir it up in there. You can just kind of shake it a little bit carefully. And what you want to do is pour this into a disposable test tube. A disposable test tube will be on the front bench. It's not one that you have in your lab drawer. And you want to check it with a magnet. When you are checking it with a magnet, basically you want to move the magnet up and down and you should see something. Don't put the magnet right over it and don't test it when they're in the weigh boats because you don't want the magnetic compound or magnetic element sticking to this magnet. It makes cleanup a little harder. And there's a part in here, once you have done that test and you are ready to, you have to come up to the fume hood and your teacher will heat it in the fume hood and you can record the results after it and test it with the magnet again. And that's all of the steps. Make sure you are making good observations throughout the lab.